Hello, and welcome to Pharmaceutical Executive Magazine's podcast series. I'm your host, Ben Comer, Senior Editor, and today I'm speaking with Chris Garabedian, President and CEO of AVI Biopharma, about how his company is partnering with the Department of Defense to develop new RNA-based therapeutics for the Ebola and Marburg viruses, as well as other infectious diseases like H1N1 and anthrax. Thanks for being here, Chris.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it.
Sure. In May, AVI announced that it had won a contract worth up to $281 million with the Department of Defense to develop two drug candidates for the treatment of Ebola and the Marburg virus. The contract was awarded through the Joint Project Manager Transformational Medical Technology Program, a Defense Department initiative created to support the development of drugs that help protect soldiers from biological threats. Before we discuss that particular contract in greater detail, Chris, can you describe some of the benefits of working with the Defense Department through the Transformational Medical Technology Program and how that partnership came about?
Sure. There are a lot of benefits, but I think I'll start with how the collaboration came about. This started because some of the researchers from some of the Department of Defense labs like USAMRIID, the U.S. Army Research Labs, they saw us present on our technology. And it so happened that there was a lab worker at USAMRIID, which is a BSL-4 lab. They are allowed to work with the most lethal viruses known to man. She had a needle stick that had the Ebola virus. They were very concerned. They quarantined her. She said goodbye to her family. And they called the company and said, we saw a presentation on your technology and was wondering if we give you the viral sequence that we're targeting for Ebola, can you produce a drug and how quickly? And the company got a call on a Thursday and worked over the weekend and had drug in vials on a plane on that following Monday to dose the patient. She didn't seroconvert, so the FDA did not approve the IND for administration, but they used that same drug to start dosing animals with the Ebola virus. And that led to a collaboration with the company to optimize the chemistry that ultimately led to proof that we had very potent activity against Ebola across three species, the mouse, the guinea pig, and the primate. And then we did the same experiment with another lethal hemorrhagic virus, Marburg, from the same Filoviridae virus family, and saw, again, very potent activity, 100% survival against Marburg versus 0% in the primate model. This is 1,000 times the lethal dose. And we showed 60 to 80% survival against Ebola in the large mammals, again, 0% survival in the primates. So this really attracted the attention of the Department of Defense on, A, how quickly we could respond with our technology to new genetic viral strains, right, that may emerge. And this led to contracts last year to support both our Ebola drug and our Marburg drug through NDA filing and FDA licensure using the animal rule NDA. And so we are already in the throes of those contracts. We have already initiated phase 1 studies in healthy volunteers with both of those drugs, and really what is the lead of our infectious disease program, of which we're now pursuing influenza, dengue, and other infectious diseases. The benefits that you were asking of working with the Department of Defense is that because they're supporting clinical development and ultimately manufacturing scale-up on their dollars, right, we are able to optimize our drugs, right? We are able to staff up with all of the key R&D personnel, the manufacturing personnel, and we have a cost-plus arrangement, so we get cash flow from those dollars, but it also offsets some of our overhead and general and administrative expenses. And so basically, we can build out a very capable biotech organization while we move products through the clinic and instead of burning cash, it actually generates cash for us. So that, we think, is the real benefit. And there's also the benefit of just scientifically collaborating, with USAMRIID researchers and the folks at, the Department of Defense, who are very interested in preparing technologies to treat, current and future potential infectious disease threats.
Right. Yeah, that's a really interesting and unique episode, and one that some other companies would not be able to replicate. But I'm curious, with respect to the contracts with Ebola and Marburg, is there a typical way that deals are structured, or could you talk about a little more about how that particular contract is structured with the Transformational Medical Technology Program in terms of milestones, or what sort of negotiation has to happen with those contracts?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what's interesting is we're going through the exact same process right now, in that there has been an RFP posted for a drug to treat and prophylax against influenza. And so we are mobilizing our internal teams currently to prepare what it would look like to do a full development program, where we just had an open IND for our flu drug, and we're preparing the specifications to the RFP that was posted, which includes several different modules, right, starting with all of the preclinical animal work that needs to be done, including the phase 1 safety studies. That's referred to as module or option 1. Then you move on to module or option 2, which is going into the phase 2 dose optimization studies. Then you go into phase 3 with your, clinical demonstrated studies for, again, in this case, for both treatment and prophylaxis of influenza. So we prepare what that program looks like. They give us the general target product profile they're looking for, and then we as a company say, this is how we would design it, this is how we would shape the clinical program, here is what we would need to do from a manufacturing standpoint to scale it up, and then we get bids out if we want to use CROs, for example, and we prepare a response to the RFP and submit that. And then they review that and decide if they like our program, then they'll decide to fund it, fully. Now, at each option or at the end of each module, they will pause and say, have you met and fulfilled the expectations of that, option or module before we commit to going to phase 2? Okay. So it's tranched. In other words, they're not going to, if something were to happen, unforeseen, safety or something, or feasibility is not there, then they have the option to say, we don't want to go, forward with this product and this program. But assuming success, then this would be funded all the way through FDA licensure. What I've just described that we're doing for influenza is the same thing we did previously for the Ebola and Marburg contracts. The difference being is that these were animal rule NDAs as opposed to patient-driven clinical trials to gain approval. And so the RFPs that were posted originally for Ebola and Marburg were to support an animal rule FDA approval. But it all starts with the Department of Defense, or sometimes this comes from NIH and NIAID, or sometimes it comes from the Health and Human Services, and BARDA is a funding arm of the Health and Human Services. But each of these government agencies post a request for proposal for which companies can respond to and get contract awards in response.
Right. And assuming that the particular agency that you're working with approves the various programs on a step-by-step basis all the way up to the NDA point, is there, given that the funding is coming from government, do the candidates receive any sort of preferred or accelerated approval pathway with FDA in terms of commercialization?
Yeah, there's actually a couple different elements to that. So the first thing I would emphasize is that the nice part of working with the government is that they've become very sophisticated of understanding the business model of biotech companies and how they're not going to put resources against a program for which they don't see any future commercial upside or any ability to actually sell the product, for a profit, et cetera. And so there's very limited restrictions on what we can do with the products. We would be the beneficiary of any stockpiling, for example, or any commercial sales that could be generated. So in the case of our influenza program, if we have a product that would be amenable to treating community influenza, we could sell that product or partner it even with a big pharma company to sell that product and gain royalties. So there's no restrictions on that part. The other thing I'll emphasize is that these programs would qualify for priority review vouchers for which we could apply to either our own products or they're transferable to other companies if we want to sell a priority review voucher to another company. But the question related to accelerated approval for these products, I would characterize it as if a true pandemic were to hit or a bioterrorist outbreak with Ebola or Marburg or influenza A strain that may not be H1N1 or H3N2, then they could get our drug approved under an emergency use authorization because they would basically push the FDA to say the need and the risk-benefit profile is too great because we need to contain this Ebola outbreak, and we need to have this drug, which is, proven, in animals that it works and has been dosed in patient safety, even if everything isn't completely fulfilled to the letter of the FDA requirements, these could qualify for emergency use authorizations. And so it's not so much priority review, it's when the need arises. But we do expect that there would be some level of stockpiling at a minimum, even if there wasn't a pandemic threat, just because the Department of Defense likes to keep some of this drug, in stockpiles for, emergency use.
Great. And in this sort of arrangement, does AVI retain patents or IP, or how does that work?
Yeah, we do. They are our products, our proprietary products, so we would retain intellectual property for sale and commercialization of these products. The only concessions would be if the government is supporting more of the manufacturing scale up, right? So they could potentially make sure that they get priority to get stockpiling supply, right? If the U.S. government is helping pay for the manufacturing scale up, but the Japanese government wants to clean out our supply, I think they would be able to prioritize the stockpiling to the U.S. government who supported this, right? So it's not so much an intellectual property, but there may be some concessions down the road which gives them some prioritization of potential use of the drug.
I see. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to ask you about, Chris, AVI has a Duchenne muscular dystrophy candidate in phase 2, and I believe you've just initiated a second phase 2 study. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind describing the unmet need in Duchenne and also how AVI's candidate shapes up against the Prosensa and GSK product that I think they're developing.
Yeah. So, first, I'll just want to clarify, we are planning to initiate our second phase 2 study by the end of June 2011. This will be a placebo-controlled study over a longer period of time, 6 months of dosing, looking at higher doses. But DMD is the most serious, prevalent childhood muscular dystrophy, and it's really devastating. There's no currently approved drug to treat DMD. Only corticosteroids are used in these patients, and this is a disease marked by the inability of these boys. It largely affects boys around the globe, and their inability to produce an essential protein in muscles called dystrophin. And that's because they have mutations and deletions in the dystrophin gene that limits their ability to produce the protein. What we're doing with our drug is repairing that RNA mutation and deletion by skipping over a particular exon in the dystrophin gene that is implicated in the particular genotype of a subset of these boys. And so by doing that, we're able to restore the dystrophin in the muscles, which we believe will lead to good clinical outcomes. And the natural history of this disease is devastating. These boys get diagnosed by the ages of 3 to 5 years of age. They typically end up in a wheelchair between the ages of 9 and 12 years of age. They typically lose their pulmonary muscle function and end up on a ventilator in their teens, and will usually pass away in their late teens, early 20s, rarely living beyond the age of 30. So we believe with our disease-modifying drug, we could delay the time to wheelchair, extend their survival ultimately, and we'll be demonstrating that through looking at surrogate markers of mobility and ambulation of the muscles in shorter-term studies.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to ask about, I believe that Prosensa and GSK's product is maybe targeting a similar area. I don't know of any other ones that you would be competing against, but would you mind just quickly talking about how your product matches up against that one? And obviously they there haven't been head-to-head trials or anything, but.
Yeah, sure. So, we have one direct competitor that targets the DMD population that would be amenable to exon skipping drugs, right? And that's, they have an exon 51 drug like us in development. They have released their systemically delivered study results recently. And when we do a side-by-side comparison, then we feel very confident in how we stack up. The first thing I would say is on the safety front, we have seen no drug-related adverse events. They've seen 100% of their patients develop proteinuria, protein in the urine, which often is a marker of kidney toxicity, of which was the dose-limiting toxicity of this drug, and has limited their ability to dose beyond 6 mg per kg in their clinical studies. We saw no proteinuria in our patients. In fact, we've dosed this drug up in animal models to the maximum feasible dose without reaching a dose-limiting toxicity. They also have 100% injection site reactions in their systemically delivered study. We've seen no injection site reactions. In fact, we did a previous study with this chemistry in an HCV population and saw fewer injection site reactions than a placebo group. So on the safety front, we think we're very differentiated. And we also have what we believe is more robust evidence of dystrophin production via Western blot, RT-PCR, and biopsy immunohistochemistry through very validated, controlled measures, and are very confident in our biochemical responses versus their drug.
And this drug would be considered an orphan. Would you mind just giving us an idea of the population for DMD?
Yeah, it is orphan drug status in the U.S. and the EMEA. It is a prevalence of about 30,000 patients in the developed countries, U.S., Europe, Japan. And we are working on a subset of that, which is amenable to exon 51, which, would be in the, let's call it, 3,000 to 5,000 patient population in the developed market. This is akin to other rare disease prevalences, whether you look at Genzyme's rare disease business or you look at Alexion, has a similar prevalence of their drug, of which they're generating, quite healthy revenues and market capitalization of their company. But we expect that with this patient population and ultra-orphan drug pricing, which is commonplace, that we have a viable business model that could, produce a drug, in the billion-dollar plus range.
Great. Thank you for the conversation, Chris, and thanks again for your participation.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. Yeah. I'm sorry. Anything else?
No, that's it. I was just going to say that podcasts on a wide variety of topics can be found on Pharmaceutical Executive's website under the Multimedia tab. Thanks for listening.